and welcome everyone to Live from the Farm. We are broadcasting today from sunny, beautiful Arco, Minnesota, where I am joined by Ben Dwire, who farms and raises crops and livestock. And Ben's going to talk today about how he's extending his crop rotations with red clover. Before I hand things over to Ben, I want to briefly introduce myself and the other PFI staffers that are behind the scenes here. So I'm Lydia English, and I'm joined in the field today by Jason and Emma, and then I am joined behind the scenes at the PFI headquarters by Maggie and Megan. We are on YouTube today and would love to hear from you, our audience. If you're out there watching, why don't you pop your name and where you're viewing from in that live chat box. If you don't see the live chat box, you're going to need to create a YouTube channel, which is just a fancy word for an account, and it's very simple. So create a channel, log in, and then join us today by asking your questions and sharing your comments with Ben. I will be relaying those to Ben throughout our Live from the Farm today. So Ben, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, fun.
I'm hoping you can start by just introducing yourself. We'll be seeing a small part of your operations today, so maybe you can talk about you, your farm, and your family, and when you started using red clover.
Yep. Like she said, my name is Ben Dwire, and I farm with my wife, Kristi. And we have two daughters, Sarah and Madison. They're 10 and 12 years old. And this is our third year of incorporating the red clover with oats and stuff. So, and yeah, in our third year of raising with the Oatly program. So
awesome. And so we have an oat field behind us here, right?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe we should start by talking about like what your crop rotation in general, like what goes on the field before the oats, and how do you integrate that together?
Well, we'll start with the oats because that's the cool crop. That's like that's my baby. So we'll start. We usually do a small grain. It's almost always oats, and we have a little bit of rye in the rotation too. And then we will follow this with a corn crop. And I guess I should back up a step. Usually the oats is either going to have red clover, or if it doesn't, we're going to put a cover crop in behind it. And we'll probably graze livestock on that in the fall. And then it'll be followed by a corn crop that'll be no-till. We're 100% no-till out here. We'll no-till corn into the field next year, and we'll terminate the cover crop usually right at or before planting. And then in the fall, we will no-till cereal rye into the corn stubble for the soybean crop the next year. And we usually will graze the corn stover also. So it's not uncommon for me to be out drilling with a herd of cows in the group. That we just turn the cows out and start drilling around them, and they move out of the way. And then the next year, we'll no-till soybeans into a green cereal rye crop. So that's kind of our general rotation, is the three crops. Almost a third of each is kind of how we try and break stuff up. So.
Cool. And do you have to do any field prep before you're planting the oats and the clover?
So no, like I said, we do all no-till. So the only thing we'll do in the spring is I'll broadcast fertilizer on top, and then we will do a burn down ahead of planting. So I'll spray, we're looking at our winter annuals, but like dandelions is a big one. So we're going to try and hit them. So we'll use Roundup and then an ounce of Sharpen. And last year, this field had a lot of dandelions in, so I actually sprayed it with 2,4-D and dicamba last November or October, before it got really cold. And that was worth its weight in gold. Probably the best weed control program for everything we've done you can get by a lot cheaper in the fall, and it does a lot more. As far as dandelions are controlled, you can get a lot more weed control in the fall than you can in the spring. Cool. So that's pretty much all we do, and then we just roll into it and plant it and just pray for some rains.
Which we haven't really gotten this year.
No, but it's doing, considering it hasn't had a lot of rain, the oats are really holding in there pretty well. They're not as tall as normal, but the stand population is really good, and the heads look like they're coming out pretty nice. So.
Well, let's get Jason to come in and maybe zoom in on some of the oats, and we can get into more of that, what you're seeding at, and, what.
Maybe come in a little past the thistles. Probably. Right up in here, you can kind of, let's see if we can find some, you can kind of, I don't know if you can zoom in down here. You can just see down here, there's some little red clovers kind of down below here. I don't know, can you see those at all? But all right down here. The red clover just kind of hangs out. It's pretty tiny yet, and a lot of it, this is probably one of our thinner red clover stands that we've had with the oats. But we mixed the oats and red clover at planting all in the box together. Kind of really, we put about, so the oats, we put, it was about 120 pounds is what it ended up being of oats that we planted. We were shooting for that just under 1.5 million seeds per acre, because we were targeting about 1.25 to 1.3 million live plants out here. And that's kind of where we came. When we did our stand counts, we were kind of in that 1.25 million was what we came up where so we came pretty close. And then we put 8 pounds of medium red clover that we mixed in. It was just, we have a single box drill, and we just kind of layer in, I don't know, probably about 6-7 bags per side of oats, and then put a bag of oats or red clover and just kind of mix it with our hands and stuff. But we've been doing that for 3 years. It's not real sophisticated, but it works pretty well. And it allows us to not have to have 2 boxes that way. And it's, like I said, it's this year, this is a really thick stand that was thicker than we normally plant. Normally we're probably closer to, probably start with like 1.1, 1.2 million and shoot for about 1 million to 800,000, but we bumped it up trying to get a little more yield out of it and stuff. So I think between the dry weather and the thicker stand, the red clover crop is suffering a tiny bit, but if we get rains and once this oats come off, it'll really take off and look good. So.
And what variety of oats are you planting here with the red clover?
So right here, this is Minnesota Pearl, and this is the second year I've planted this one, and probably 80% of my oat acre, and a little over that, about 80% or better of my oats are all Minnesota Pearl this year. And last year was the first year. Really, really like that variety. Some of the most beautiful seed I've ever seen. It's just really fat, plumps. The amount of plump kernels that you get as compared to other varieties is really high, so you don't have all those thins and lights that blow out the back of the combine. And we've had an easier time getting good test weight for food grade with the Pearl. On the other side of the road, we've got a new variety we're trying. It's called Rushmore out of South Dakota State. Very similar. They're both white oats, white hulled oats. I think it's 2 days earlier maturity than Dion. So part of it is like, well, we can start combining that field, get the bugs worked out, and then move into the Pearl. Move into the Pearl, but so far it looks pretty promising, and a lot of the yield trials, it seems like you're kind of a horse apiece. It doesn't, they were within this one's a couple bushels, that one was, so I'm like, well, I think they'll match up pretty good. So I'm excited to see. I didn't really notice a lot of difference in anything on the 2 until about a week ago when they started heading out, and then it reminded me that was earlier maturing, because came out and checked and all we had was flag leaves out here, and that thing was shooting heads out like crazy, or starting to, and we knew we had to roll with fungicide pretty fast. So, but no, I'm excited to see how they play out.
And Ben, do you think if people are interested in underseeding red clover with their oats, is there anything they need to look for in a variety that would be conducive to that? Like, should they plant a shorter variety, or do you think any sort of oat, as long as it has the characteristics they want, would be good in red clover?
I've done it with Pearl, Dion, Shelby, and now with Rushmore, and I think it'll work. I mean, obviously a shorter variety is usually better because you get a little more sunlight down there. But I also would say put your emphasis on the grain quality and the yield, and let the red clover is tough stuff. I mean, it's strong. It'll do its job. But I wouldn't get too hung up on it. I mean, if you're underseeding alfalfa, you're gonna have a stand of alfalfa, then you probably want to give it more consideration. But if it's a cover crop, make sure you put your emphasis on the yield, and especially the milling qualities, like the test weight and stuff, and work around it. That would be my advice on that. But.
And we had a question in the chat here of what climate zone you're in here. Do you know that off the top of your head? There was a guess of 6A.
Could be. So interesting thing though, we live in a part of Minnesota where it's called the Buffalo Ridge. It's kind of weird. We actually line up closer to Fargo than they do in Marshall because of our elevation. We're about 800 feet higher here than they are just 15 miles away in Marshall. Because we're right around 17 to 1800 feet elevation here. And so I'm not sure of the climate, but the elevation messes with our stuff. So for us, you know, you don't have to go very far, and they raise a lot of full season corn and soybean varieties. Right where we're at, mid to low 90s, it seems to be our sweet spot for corn maturities and stuff. So I actually don't quite know what our climate zone would be, but I just know realistically we almost match up closer to North Dakota almost.
And I have another question while we're paused from Stefan here. Do you ever mow the red clover after oat harvest, like in August and September, to manage annual weeds like foxtail?
No, we didn't. And so we actually, what we're going to do is we're going to graze it this year. So we usually, so as soon as this comes up, you can actually hear the cows in the background. My neighbor's got a pasture around it, and we worked out, I'm going to fence it all in, and we're going to turn his cows out here. And so, yeah, we usually will put cattle on the red clover every year.
And that seems to help with the weeds.
Yeah. Now last year we didn't because it quit raining, and we had good red clover, but everybody had to pull their cows off of pasture about a month before the red clover was ready. So Luke's cows were all gone and home. And so where we're at now, we're kind of secluded. It's like a mile down a dirt trail to get out here. So no one's gonna, it was hard to trailer cows back and forth just to come back real quick. So last year we actually didn't graze it, but normally we do, so.
Okay, great. Okay, so I want to circle back. You said you're raising oats for Oatly, food grade oats. I'm curious, you started planting them 3 years ago, and I want to ask more of a philosophical question here. You know, why did you start planting oats? And especially this year, we have pretty high corn and soybean prices, so why continue to integrate oats and red clover?
Well, one of the reasons is I just plain out like oats. They're fun, I enjoy them, I get a lot of joy off of being in my oat fields. I know it's weird, but I just really, really like them. And I always tell people, I said, oats are one of them crops that make everything else look good. You know, they do their job, and you can make a little bit of money off of them. They don't pay as well as corn and beans usually. But the corn the year after the oats usually does better. And then the beans, just having that rotation, we can not use as many traded varieties. So we plant all conventional corn and soybeans. So we can break up our pest cycles, and it allows me, with the red clover, we got a full season cover crop pretty much going here. You can really up your soil health program and get a lot more benefits to the soil by having that small grain in the rotation. So I mean, when you look at it as a whole entire system instead of individual segments, it really makes the system pop. By itself, it's like, yeah, it's okay. But when you put it together as a whole system, it really, and then you add the livestock to it, and you're getting free feed off of it, and they're putting the manure back on the ground, and it just really makes the system move.
Well, I love that. Love to hear that. We did not pay Ben to say that, everyone, just saying. Okay, so we've talked about seeding, and we're going to look at Ben's drill in just a few minutes, but while we're in the field, so we have the oats and the red clover are establishing. You mentioned that you're putting on a little bit of fertility before the oats are going in the ground, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that? And then, you know, are you using any herbicides or any other crop protectants, and how is that compatible with the clover?
Yep. So when you know, with oats, you don't put nearly as much fertilizer on as you do with corn and stuff. We're putting about 50 pounds of nitrogen on, and then 40 pounds of potassium and 40 pounds of phosphorus, and I think we got 15 pounds of sulfur out here too, if I remember right. Or maybe it was 10. I think it was 10 on this one. But yeah, we just broadcast it on, but I do treat all of my nitrogen with kind of a nitrogen inhibitor, so just in case you get a dry year, it's not just all lost and stuff, just to kind of help make sure it's, we do that with all of our acres. We treat all of the nitrogen, and we actually treated the phosphorus this year too, to make it more plant available, just trying to make those phosphorus dollars go a little further. And we just kind of broadcast that on, pretty simple. And then with the red clover, it does make the weed control a little more tricky because you're really limited to what you can use. We used a herbicide called Sword. It's just generic MCPA is what it is. That's what the chemical name is. The guys at the co-op call it the old oat herbicide. It's been around since like the 60s or 70s. It's been around forever, but it's safe on alfalfa and red clover with seeding for oats. It's not as nearly got the punch of a lot of other herbicides, but you know, it'll usually twist up the thistles pretty good. I got a little bit on the edges of the field, but for the most part, the field's pretty clean. So we've been really happy with that. And it's, like I said, that was just happened to talk to an older guy who mentioned that because we weren't sure how to deal with that. And he mentioned it and called the co-op and like, oh yeah. And that's what we've been using ever since. So it's, yeah, like I said, I've been real happy with that program. And then as you can see, we're pretty much getting it fully headed out at this point. This last weekend, we put fungicide on, right? When the flag leaf's out and we're starting to see some head emergence, we hit it all with fungicide. And we actually tried a new product this year too, now that I'm thinking about it, on the oats. It's called Squadron, but it's supposed to help with the stress from heat during pollination. So we're just trying that out this year to see, because when you get those, right now we got beautiful weather and yesterday was cool, but like last week we had that 90 to 100 degree temperatures. That's the best way to just take you right out of the money for the test weights. So it's basically an insurance policy. We're just trying it out to see if it'll help mitigate the risk, because you don't have any control about when it's going to get hot or when it's going to dry. So we're just trying to level the playing field as best we can while we're out here. So.
And Ben, could you point out the flag leaf, or like when you say they're heading out, and have Jason maybe zoom in on that? Yeah.
Yep. So you can see this is the flag leaf, and this is probably 3/4 out, because where my thumb's at down here, I can still feel little spikelets coming out. So I mean, if I actually open it up, you can see there's still quite a few more that haven't even emerged. And then this stem's going to shoot up quite a ways yet and stuff too. But as soon as you start seeing these flag leaves, you know it's time to go. But I think most of the fungicide recommendations say once you get to 3/4 to half head emergence out of the sheath, you need to stop applying it. And I think a lot of it just has to do is if you look down here, you can't really hit that flag leaf very well because it's covered by all of these guys. And the reason we're putting the fungicide on is because by far our number one problem we have is crown stem rust. And so we're just trying to protect that flag leaf, because that's kind of the engine that's going to be pumping all the starch and stuff into these guys, getting the test weight. So we don't want any kinds of lesions or stuff on that flag leaf, because that's what's really getting the photosynthesis pumped into these little guys. So.
Okay, speaking of pests, we've got a question in the chat here. Have you seen an increase of wireworm and cutworm in your corn following red clover?
I have not. I can't say that I have.
Any pest changes at all in that part of in corn following clover?
No, we haven't really seen as much as the pest. No, the corn following red clover. I'm not saying that they're not there and I haven't missed them, but I can't say that we've really seen any. So. Yeah. Now we have, I was telling them earlier, last year we had some real issues with grasshoppers in the oats, and they probably took as much as 1/3 of our oat crop by the time we were done. And so that we're watching pretty close for. And I did see some in the corn the other day, but I was telling them when I was out here last Thursday, I started seeing grasshoppers about 1/4 of an inch size that were out here. You almost could have mistook them for mosquitoes. They were pretty tiny. But they were moving in, and we know this is an issue we got to deal with out here. So with it being so dry, we actually did spray the grasshoppers off too when we were out here spraying the fungicide. So.
Okay, so this is a red clover field day. So maybe we could just have Jason zoom in. We can find some of the little red clover one more time and have Jason zoom in. And I'm
some
curious,
right here. Kind of see them down there.
Are you expecting, if it rains, hopefully it rains, are you expecting that to just pop, or would you say it's probably going to stay that small until the oats come off?
It'll come a little better. Usually when I'm swathing the oats, if you see 1 inch tall, that would be a really good red clover plant.
Okay, so you're looking for that inch.
And that would be really good. But you come back after it, once the oats are off, it really greens up. Especially if you catch a nice rain. I mean, it really comes.
And has that happened? Have you had a nice crop the last couple of years?
We've had really good luck getting the red clover, and that was part of the reason we looked at the red clover too, because I've raised oats for probably 4 or 5 years now without doing the red clover. And the years before, it's like we had years where we were combining till September one year, and then it was wet, and we put the red clover, or we put our cover crop in. And we finally got enough rain to get it started, and it froze 2 weeks later. And I was like, oh shoot. And some years you have phenomenal luck and it's just like picture perfect. But we've had some wet years and some dry years, and I was like, you know what? I know if I put it in with the oats, I'm gonna get it established because we got enough to get it started in April, May. So it takes one more thing off that we have to worry about because we know it's in the ground and going. And as soon as you take it off, it's ready to grow. There's no waiting for the drill, it just goes. So.
Well, speaking of the drill,
yeah.
Should we lead people over to the drill?
Yep.
Okay, I'll let you lead the way. This is our drill that we use. We use it for all of our soybean acres and all of our small grain acres. My favorite thing to plant with is the drill. I mean, I have to use a corn planter for corn, but I'd rather use the drill. But so this is on 7-inch spacings, and even when I plant my soybeans, I leave it at 7-inch spacings because this is kind of taken away from some of my, from grazing stuff. But if you consider your field to be a solar panel, I want those plants as close together, grabbing as much sunlight. The more ground that's covered, the better. So I'd rather have it in 7 instead of, especially small grains, you need to be in narrow spacings. But I like the 7-inch spacings. That's been really good. This is a Case IH one. We've got a Yetter coulter cart on the front, which just got the wavy coulters. And then this is pretty similar to what you would see on a Great Plains drill or something like that. The one thing that I like about the Case IH, their disc openers, is they're double disc, but they're offset. So you can't really see so much from here, but there's one disc that's actually ahead of the other, and the second one is tucked in behind it, so you get more of a cutting action. And it's the same as our planter. We got a Case IH planter, and it's the same. But it's nice because it pushes the residue out of the way, and you don't get as much hairpinning and stuff. And then we added in these Keaton seed firmers. Welcome back, everyone. Sorry about that. We don't get great reception from the ground, it turns out. So we're going to stay upright. Okay, I think we probably left off somewhere
the seed firmers?
With the seed firmers.
Yep.
Hopefully everyone got that. Maybe we can come around this side and you can talk. Did you have more to say about this, Ben?
No, like I said, the only thing I was going to add was, like I just said, it really helps with the uniformity of the oat crop. Like when we were out here spreading fungicide, these guys were all heading out at the same time. You don't have the streaks as much to the field. And the more uniform, it just makes harvesting and application so much easier when you have a uniform head emergence and stuff on that. So the only downside to them is when do not back up with the drill not close to the ground, because they snap off. They're just plastic. You better have a few extra on hand, because we all do it when you plug it up. But you just want to make sure you got to have this thing lifted all the way up when you back up, because they hang down so at an angle and they just snap right off. So, but whatever.
All right, so maybe you were telling me about this.
Yep.
Or Should we talk about this next?
Yep,
okay.
we sure can. So this was the new addition that we added to the drill this year. We put this rolling basket on the back, and you can adjust the down pressure and stuff. We have it set pretty light. Kind of the main reasons we got this was just to make sure we had the seed. With no-till, you don't really have a firm seed bed, so it's not an issue, but it kind of helps make sure any seeds that are left up on the surface are kind of covered and pushed in the best we can. But the biggest reason we bought this was for the soybeans. We no-till in a cereal ride that's usually headed out, and trying to attempt to get it as flat to the ground. I don't have a roller crimper, so we're trying to do it in a one-pass system. It's not as good as a roller crimper, but it's still pretty cool, and I was really happy with it. I sprayed the rye with the beans right before we planted, about a day or two ahead of time. And when you go over it, it really kinks the stem, but it doesn't lay it flat like the roller crimper does. It doesn't look quite as cool, but about 3 days later, she's down. It does go down to the ground like you want it to. It's just not gonna happen in it's not gonna be instant, but really liked it, and it just kind of firms everything up and fills up some of the gullies, and stuff. So yeah, like I said, it's pretty good. It does change the disposition of the weight of the tractor. You got to have duals on there now because there's enough weight on the back that going down the road, she'll throw you around a little bit. So yeah, like I said, they're pretty, I don't know, drills are just neat things. Been around since they've had horses pulling them. It's the same genuine concept. We just add a few things to them, but they still work and they're still fun to run.
And so you mentioned in the field one box for the oats and the clover. And how do you ensure that you don't have seeds settling out and you're only seeding oats one place and only seeding clover in another place? Yep,
it hasn't been an issue, just mostly because of the seed shape. The oats are kind of a long oval type thing, and the red clover is a little, and we're only putting about 8 pounds, so it's not a lot. It just kind of falls in between the cracks. And I'm not saying it's perfect because, I'm sure there's variability because I'm mixing it by hand a little bit. It's very kind of unsophisticated, but it works. And it seems to be good enough anyways, put it that way, so.
And you mentioned there's no agitator in it.
No, there's no agitator. Okay. It's just a straight grain box on there, yep. Awesome.
Okay, great. Okay, well we had, a couple questions here, and I think one of them we'll table because we are going to go look at corn. I'll jump in here. We are going to go look at corn just shortly, and so one person asked about taking N credits, and I think we'll wait and talk about that. Another person here asked, have you noticed your crops being more drought resilient with your use of cover crops?
I think so, yeah. Like the oats and stuff really seem to be holding on, and the soybeans, we don't have any soybeans to look at here, but yeah, for the most part it does. Where really is nice is your water infiltration and your holding rate really goes up, and we haven't gotten a good rain like that in a while, but you get one of those big rains that comes through that drops it in like 15 minutes, and you get like a half an inch or an inch in 15 minutes, and everybody's like, oh shoot, it all just ran down the hill and didn't really soak in. It was like, we know we can grab it and we can slow it down enough to grab, that's where it really is nice, is when you get them thunderstorms in the summer that you're really counting on, you can slow it down and get it to where it needs to be and keep it there because you got enough cover to keep it in the ground. And your rooting structure changes. The soil is really porous and you can get them roots down further too. So yeah, it does. We're gonna go look at the corn. That's been struggling because the corn, it happened to me last year, went through a really ugly phase where it came out of it late summer and really came on. We were really pleased with how it went, but the first month we had the corn growing, we were pretty sick about how it looked, and it looks like that again now. But it hasn't had a whole lot of rain to get started, but I think a lot of when that nitrogen kicks in August from the red clover, I think that's kind of when she really steps on the gas.
Well, should we go? We're going to go on a little bit of a walk.
Down there.
Walk and talk. Okay, so I want to come back to oats. You mentioned you swath.
Yep, I swath it.
Okay,
yep.
Have you ever tried, is that tried and true what you do? Ever tried direct cutting?
I've done both.
Okay, and why swath?
Because when we were direct cutting, it was really, really hot and humid, and you could probably get another 3 hours of harvesting in a day with swathing. You knew the grain would be dry, but the oat stems would be just raggy and they'd wrap around the reel. And you knew when you were about ready to have a bad day because you'd be cutting and all of a sudden it would just start wrapping around the fingers of the reel and not feeding in, and you know you're about ready to plug it up and spend a half hour pulling it out of the combine. With the swathing, it's just, you get a little more of a daily window to work. Also, the grain goes through the sweat out in the field. I think that helps a lot too with storing it. The downside is if you catch some rains at the wrong time, and that can get kind of ugly too. So
Yeah.
there's good things to both systems. It probably comes down to the weather during a particular year. But I've settled on the swather, and actually a swathing fun job. I kind of enjoy that too. So that's, yeah, I like that. I kind of like.
And with the red, you mentioned you're really not getting more than an inch
Right.
at the time of harvest. So do you cut pretty low?
I take it all the way down.
You take it all the way down?
Yep, because we'll bale the straw off too.
Okay.
For bedding.
Okay.
And then, and let her come up. So, speaking of with the red clover, 3 years back, we did have, I got like, I think it was close to 8 to 10 inches of rain on the oats when it was in the windrow. And I know Dad had one old guy tell me, he's like, oh, an inch or two of rain on the oats will be fine. And it is, but 10 inches is not. And we did have problems with the red clover growing up through the windrow before it got, and it came up, but so if you get into a really wet season, the red clover can grow through the windrow. It can happen, and I've had, but we were so far away from food grade oats at that point that they all went into the feed yard and got fed up. I've got actually the friend of mine who is going to put cattle out here, when we have those kinds of things happen, he's the one who buys my off feed and runs it through his feedlot. So really good to have some good livestock friends. Those are the guys that bail you out when you get into trouble.
Yeah, and speaking of livestock, are you, when you're grazing a stand, okay, so I'm not a livestock expert here, but when you're grazing a stand of red clover, do you have to worry about any issues of like bloat or anything, or is there any issues with just putting cattle directly on
We
the
have
red
never
clover?
had problems with it. And a lot of times you're going to get a lot of volunteer oats because we're doing the food grade thing. All of the light, thin oats, we're going to blow out the back of the combine. So we get a lot of volunteer oats that come with it. So it's almost like an oats red clover mix when they're grazing. But that being said, we usually like to put a couple hay bales on the corner of the field, just a dry kind of a roughage base, because it's so lush that if they get a bellyache, they're going to migrate to that hay to kind of balance their diet out a little bit. And they will do that. And that'll save you a lot of heartache doing that. So.
And then before we move on to the corn, just one last question. You said, over time you've finessed growing food grade oats, which, as you've already mentioned to the audience, require the grain to be heavier, which is tricky to do. Any other tips at oat harvest besides swathing? You put some air on the oats. Anything else you do to sort of help get that grain up to a...
I like to try and run it through a couple augers if I can.
Okay.
I'll put it in the dryer bin, run the fans and stirrator, and then I move it to the bin on the end, just because you knock the tails off of some of the hulls. It seems like you can pick up an extra half a pound and stuff there. So.
Yeah. So should we come out maybe here and?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like I said, this corn is really, it's gonna come along. It has not had a lot of rain. But like I said, last year did this too, where it's just, but you can see the residue from the red clover. This red clover was probably 30 some inches, or not 30, it was about knee high.
Should we get Jason to zoom in on that?
Yeah, if you want to.
Residue?
Yep.
Okay.
You
said how high was it?
probably about knee high to me.
Oh,
so
okay.
I wanted to say 30, but it's not 30. Probably
Okay,
more like 15,
okay.
15 or so, 15, 16 inches tall. But one of the things that we had happen is red clover is tough. It's awesome, but it's also you gotta really watch it because it can get away from you. We sprayed this field with wide match and burned it down, and wide match and Roundup. But when you got a really thick stand, you're gonna hit all the big guys on the top, but the little fellas that are underneath hiding, those guys don't get touched by the herbicide. So we burned it off, but there was still probably 15 to 20% that came back with the corn that we just got done spraying this about a week and a half ago. So we had to come back through a second time. We use a herbicide called Status as dicamba, to finish off the red clover, and it did a good job. It really killed it. One of them deals, we just need a good shot of rain and she'll really turn around. So.
And have you had issues? Is this sort of like always going to be a 2-pass system, you think, with trying to terminate red clover? I just know a lot of people have a hard time with it.
I'm going to be honest with you. I think it is. This same thing happened to me last year. I had my field look like this all the way into July, and about August and September, it's like it stepped on the gas and took off, and it went from being like, what did you do to your corn, to we started getting neighbors calling. They're like, how did you get it so dark green and healthy? And it ended up being really heavy, and it was some of our highest yielding corn, but it looked horrible to start with. But I think when you have that thick canopy, the realities of getting every single leaf hit to the bottom when you got that thick of a canopy I think it would be pretty unrealistic. I'm not saying you couldn't do it, and maybe if you have an awesome sprayer better than mine, you probably could, but I don't know if you can do it in one pass. I just don't know.
And can you just clarify again, are you trying to get the clover dead before you plant, or are you planting green into the clover?
I killed it before I planted it.
Okay.
But I killed it right before I planted it because I was trying to let the red clover build as much nitrogen into the soil as I could. That being said, had I known the rain was going to shut off, because once we planted this, I don't know, I'm guessing this field got half an inch to 3/10 since it's been planted. Had I known, I maybe would have terminated a little shorter, because it uses a lot of water. It's a thirsty crop. So, yeah.
Okay, well, speaking of fertility, we had a question about N credits. What's your nitrogen program when you're following an oat and clover system?
Generally speaking with these, we'll usually, I'm being kind of conservative, but usually we take about 40 pounds of nitrogen off of the fertility program with this. I mean, I've been hearing guys say, upwards of 70 pounds, on a good year for some stuff. I don't know. I would rather play it safe for now, so we're just kind of planning on 40. So but that's kind of what we're trying to credit, about 40 pounds. Like I said, it'll grow up in the fall and it'll be knee high or higher when we graze it in the fall, and then we try and do that again in the spring. So.
And so where does that leave you for your total N? Are you at like 120, 100 units? And can you walk through a little bit about what you're tinkering with for your N program and when you're applying? Yep.
So right now, as of today, we've only got 100 pounds of nitrogen on all of our corn. That's all we've got on. And some of them we're going to do like anywhere from 120 to 140 pounds of N total. And we got a couple fields we're going to try just doing 100 to see, doing some trial programs just to see what we can do with just 100 pounds of added N. So otherwise we were probably looking closer to 180 on what we were at before. So 170 to 180 depending on the field. So
yeah, and we had a question here from Liz. After the passes to terminate the clover, do you do any further herbicide passes, and how long is this residue gonna last in the season, do you think?
Okay, yeah, we'll start with yes, we do a burn down, and then like we said, we just came by. So I should mention, this is all non-GMO. This is all conventional corn. That's why you're seeing some green out here, because the grass killer we use is really slow. It just takes, if this was, I've got a field up the road that we did this to, and that one happens to be Roundup. It's the only Roundup field I have. I mean, that is the glory of Roundup, is you can kill grass really good, and it's cheap and it works. No, we will do an in-season pass, and honestly, most of the time you're trying to kill the red clover more than the weeds, because this stuff will stay pretty clean once the corn comes up. And when I combined last fall, this red clover mat will be gone. It'll break down by November. It is pretty much gone. And I know, like last fall when I did this, you could watch a rabbit run for half a mile down the road. It was spotless, and it was all gone. It really, I was impressed last year. So
awesome. Okay, well, Ben, we are nearing the end of our time here. I'm curious, are there things we didn't touch upon that you feel like people should know about for your system, or red clover, or parting thoughts about integrating red clover into cropping systems?
No, like I said, it's really, as far as the oat side of it goes, it's really pretty simple. It's not too hard. The corn side, I mean, everybody's got their own system. It's probably, if you want to make life easier on yourself, if you try it with traded corns, it makes it gives you a lot more options and stuff as far as controlling some of the, the cover crop that comes through.
What do you mean traded corns? Non-GMO?
Like Roundup, like Roundup Ready, or if you can use Liberty or some of them.
Got it.
Or even with your soybeans. But I mean, like I said, I've been doing it with conventional corns, and it does work. It's just it takes a little more thought process to it and stuff. But it's challenging, but I like it. So
you like up for the challenge?
Yep, and you have to be. And it's like I said, red clover. You don't turn your back on it though. You have to be checking it to make sure it stays dead, because it can look dead and come back. You gotta actually dig it out of the ground and cut the crowns in half and make sure that it's dying. And
yeah.
But it's. I was telling a friend of mine, I said, it's kind of like playing with a monster or nuclear power in a way. It can do amazing things, but it also can get you into trouble if you don't keep your eye on it. So it's like, you just got to keep an eye on it and make sure you're on top of it.
Yeah, and anything else as you look towards the future, anything else you're thinking about tinkering with, or like, other stuff you're interested in trying, you think?
We do have 2 small fields of 60-inch corn that we're trying a little bit this year. We'll see. I want to mention one other thing. We have 2 fields that we had red clover in last year that I also put cereal rye into. And both of those fields are my 2 best corn fields I have. It was the same as this, non-GMO corn, and all we had was 60 pounds of cereal rye in with the red clover. I don't have any stunting at all. That corn is 2 to 3 leaf stages ahead of this, planted on the same day in the same varieties. I don't know if there's something to it or not, but that's something we're going to look into pretty hard too, because it is amazing the difference with just a little bit of cereal rye. So we're kind of going to see, there's a good chance a lot of these oat fields are going to get cereal rye put into them this year, just a little bit. It's just a little bit more diversity in having our grass species. And my hunch with part of that is because I think the small grains are a topsoil loosener. Red clover can kind of make the ground hard. And I think it loosens it up enough to let that water in and just kind of the checks and balance system. So yeah, that's something we're going to probably look at pretty hard. Cool.
And was that system okay to terminate, or did you have same?
Actually, I had better kill on the red clover with the rye in there.
Okay.
I had that red clover dead in 1 shot with the rye.
All right.
So it could be a 1-pass system if you put not saying it's going to be that every year, but both those fields turned out that way. So we'll see. We'll find out when we combine.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to share the results with us.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear how that goes. All right. Well, we are sadly out of time. Okay. And I just want to thank Ben again for joining us today on this beautiful day and sharing all of his knowledge about red clover and how he's integrated small grains and red clover into his cropping system. I also want to thank Kristi Dwire, who's behind the scenes but also a mastermind of the oat business and integral to getting this working for their farm. To those of you viewing out there, we would love your feedback on this event. We take feedback really seriously. We read all our evaluations. And so please take a minute and fill out the link that's in the description of this video. It really drives our future programming. I also want to close with just a few notes about Practical Farmers of Iowa. We are a farmer-led organization based in Ames, Iowa, and we serve the greater Midwest. And we believe farmers are at the center of information sharing and investigation. And so that's why we put on events like this, where Ben can share all of his knowledge with other farmers. And these events are in part possible from some of our sponsors. So I want to thank Grain Millers and Johnson County Public Health for helping us put on this event today. We are going to be doing a combination of hybrid and in-person events for the rest of the summer because we heard from you all that you like both. So we'll be publishing information about our in-person field days shortly, so keep an eye about that on our website. And then we'll be broadcasting again, not live from the farm, but live from the butcher next week at 9 a.m. So tune into tour Clarion Locker with owners Elmarie and Manny Nell, where they're going to walk through their processing facility and how they work directly with farmers. So until then, stay cool. Hopefully we all get some rain. Thanks again, Ben.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.